Chapter 11, New Friends. The sun was just about to touch the treetops in the west as everyone had filled their plates with food and made their way to the tables to enjoy the feast. Early in the feast, the gathering by now had settled into a steady level of conversation. Michael Williams and his wife, Kathy, who had arrived earlier to the celebration along with their family, had seated themselves near the end of one of the long tables across from Elijah and Rebecca Elgin. The Williams had been invited as guests of the McNeils to meet and make formal introductions to Elder Zachariah, Elijah, and Uriah Elgin. Thomas, Roger, and Michael, I'd like to introduce you to our leader Zachariah Elgin and his son Elijah, his wife Rebecca and his nephew, Uriah Elgin and his wife Sarah. Daniels motioned to each as he called their names. It was Zachariah's father John Elgin, who helped lead all of our families out of harm's way and to safe shelter before the Great Cataclysm, explained Daniels. John Elgin was the pastor of a large church in this area, and he and his brother-in-law, my grandfather, Tim Daniels, were also partners in a local home-building business. I see. Well, that it explains it then. It must run in the family, remarked McNeil. You've built yourself a real nice home here, Joseph. We could use some help from you in our camp. So, tell me, Elijah, what's your specialty? Are you also a minister then? Asked Williams. No, I raise horses. My wife Rebecca here is good at breeding them, and I train them, explained Elijah. My father Zachariah here, he's the minister. Elijah motioned to Zachariah. It's good to meet you, sir. We appreciate being invited to your celebration, bellowed Williams, as he reached out and took his hand and shook it, followed by Thomas McNeil. Our families are glad you could all come and visit. However, I'm not much into all the celebration right now, I'm afraid. I'll leave that up to all the rest of you this evening. I think I'm going to retire a little early. My stomach's been bothering me all day, moaned Zachariah, getting up from the table to leave. Good night, Dad. Hope you feel better in the morning, offered Elijah. Good night, everyone. It's been nice meeting you folks. Enjoy yourselves, insisted Zachariah, as he turned and left the table, stopping to visit at some of the other tables before leaving the celebration. Elijah, is your mother here tonight? Asked Kathy Williams. My mother, Rachel Elgin, passed away 3 years ago from cancer right after we began our trip up here. That was one reason why it took us so long to get here. We stopped at the Mississippi River. There was a doctor we knew that lived there, and he tried to treat her, but with medicines being in such short supply, well, the best he could do was ease her suffering, explained Rebecca. I'm sorry, we didn't realize, answered Williams. That's okay. We've lost many of our people over the years, to cancer, flu, and infections. It's something you get used to, I suppose. We could sure use a skilled doctor around here, remarked Elijah. You don't have a doctor or nurse in your group, do you, Tom? No, I'm sorry, no doctors in our group. We have weavers, cloth and paper makers, several farmers. We do have a good amount of animal stock and seed handy, if you should need extra chickens, lambs, or goats, offered McNeil. As for me, well, I guess you could say I'm sort of a jack of all trades. How about you, Michael? Any doctors among your group? No doctors in our group either. We have 1 or 2 of our women who are good with basic first aid and they have some medical knowledge, but whatever major help they need, we keep an assortment of medical books handy, continued Williams. Although, we have heard that there might be some doctors and nurses in the Elgin Clan. We'll have to verify that first, though. Well, if any of you need riding horses or pulling horses bred or trained, Rebecca and I can set you up. How about you, Michael? What's your specialty? I'm a blacksmith and metalworker. So, if you need something fixed or something made of metal, I can design and put it together for you. Saws, plows, or you name it, noted Williams, pointing over to a wagon that was parked next to a stand of oaks on the other side of the house. I built that buggy over there a week ago, out of scrap metal we found and collected up along the river. No kidding, boomed Elijah, looking the buggy over. Nice work. You don't suppose you could fix up an old bicycle of ours, do you? Maybe, if I could look at it. How busted up is it? Asked Williams. Well, a few years ago we found a couple of bicycles that weren't in too bad a shape, down around the outskirts of old Birmingham. We managed to get a couple of them working too, but one of our other boys, Kevin Tobbs over there, snickered Elijah, pointing to where Kevin was seated a few tables away. He took it down a hill too fast and crashed it into the side of a ravine. We kept the bike around just in case we ever had time to fix it. I repair and restore all sorts of stuff, you know, bicycles, horse carts, bathtubs, and even a few wood stoves, he said. Joseph Daniels' eyes suddenly lit up. You wouldn't happen to have an extra wood stove and a bathtub around, would you? Yep, sure do, said Williams. Joseph shot a glance at Mary, who had a huge smile forming on her face. Well, I can see I'm going to have to see about a trade of some sort here tonight. Joseph, you go help those nice folks build a house right away, and then you bring me home a brand new bathtub, then I will go get it filled up with hot water, and you won't see me for a whole week, bellowed Mary. Everyone laughed. Where are you able to even find all that stuff, Michael? Asked Elijah. There are ruins of an old town just northeast of here, a few miles north of the creek and up the river. Some of that stuff I found was scattered all over the place, most of it rusted beyond repair, but occasionally I find some things in pretty good shape. Drag it back to our place, clean it and fix it up, exclaimed Williams. Mary reached under the table and poked Joseph in the thigh, giving him a nod to remind him of a responsibility that he had nearly forgotten about in all the celebrating. Joseph stood up, ceremoniously setting his drink down on the wooden table with a loud thud. The noise was sufficient in its intent of getting everyone's attention. I apologize to everyone, bellowed Daniels in a loud voice, as he stood at the end of the table and waited for the conversations to die down. I am afraid that I've been remiss in my duties as host this afternoon, as my wife Mary here has so discreetly reminded me, said Joseph, winking at Mary. First, I want to especially thank my wife Mary, Sarah Elgin, and Gina Rickton for putting this annual celebration of ours together. Everyone was applauding, except for Mary, who was whispering something to Joseph under her breath. Oh, and yes, I need to thank Caleb, Martha, Peter, and our daughters, Elsa and Beatrice, for all their help as well in getting everything set up for us, mentioned Daniels. There came more applause as Daniels waited a few more seconds, then he gestured to all of the guests seated at the long table. I also wish to thank our special guest for coming this afternoon and joining with us. There was the beginning of applause, as Daniels quickly held up his hand in the air. Wait, hold on that a minute. First, let me introduce our neighbors from north of the creek, Thomas and Karen McNeil and his second Roger Cardones and all their family who have joined us here today. Daniels motioned for all of them to stand up. Daniels clapped and waited until the applause began to die down. I also want to introduce another new neighbor of ours from out east, Michael Williams and his wife Candy, and their family. Joseph motioned for each of them to stand as everyone cheered and clapped. Joseph reached down, grabbing his drink up off the table and held it high up in the air. May this be the first of many, and many of more to come, vowed Daniels, as he raised his cup in a toast. A loud cheer went up from the crowd, as chants of here could be heard all around, as everyone else soon followed suit, raising their glasses up in a toast. Thomas McNeil held up his hand high, waving it in the air, waiting for the applause to die down. I want to offer a toast as well, on behalf of the McNeil and Williams clans. Thank you to all of you for inviting us here and making us feel welcomed. May this be the beginning of a new community of clanship as well as a new and lasting friendship between us all, offered McNeil. I second that, added Williams, deciding he needed to say something, while opting to keep it short, as everyone started clapping and cheering once again. The cheers and handshakes continued to be exchanged a little while longer as the celebration slowly returned to its normal level of conversation. As all finished shaking hands and toasting, all the guests once again returned to their seats. As Joseph started to sit down, he gazed at Mary, who gave him her nod of approval. I'm glad that's out of the way, he whispered. The dinner continued a little longer, with Gina Rickton and Alice Miller bringing out several freshly baked blueberry pies and other samplings of freshly made desserts and setting them out on the tables. Well, Lisa, what do you think of our little May Day celebration so far? Leslie asked, playing around with her mashed potatoes. Your family really knows how to have a good time, but all your boys are a little, how should I say it, full of themselves, crowed Lisa, getting a chuckle from both Leslie and Martha. Oh, I'm sorry, Caleb, present company accepted. You're nice, easy to talk to. Caleb blushed. I'm afraid you just don't know the real me yet, he teased. Caleb's always been our favorite. Leslie joked, stroking his long brown wavy hair. It's okay, Caleb, we love you, joked Martha. They all laughed. Lisa raised her index finger up in the air. Well, here's an example of what I'm talking about. Earlier this afternoon, before the maypole dance thing you guys did, which was fun by the way, I went up to say hi to this boy. His name was Jeremy. Lisa paused, trying to remember his last name. Tate, offered Martha. That's it, Jeremy Tate. Anyway, he started going on, bragging to me about how good a shot he was with the crossbow, and how he could shoot out a rabbit's eye out at 50 yards, hissed Lisa. No way, chimed in Martha and Leslie. Yeah, kind of gross, huh? Not. Hi, how are you? My name is Jeremy, what's yours? He was just bragging all the time about himself, constantly. You know, some guys think that is all girls are interested in, insisted Caleb. You mean, girls like me, said Martha. No, not you. I didn't mean that. I was just saying, Caleb stuttered. The girls laughed. Caleb blushed a little more. Hey Lisa, come with me for a minute, I want to introduce you to someone, offered Leslie. You two excuse us, we'll be right back. Leslie grabbed Lisa's hand as she took her over to one of the other tables on the other side of the meadow. Martha and Caleb were finally alone. Sorry, Caleb, I hope my friends didn't embarrass you. No, I'm all right. They didn't bother me, he replied, finishing the last bite of his blueberry pie. By the way, I missed you last Sabbath. Where were you? I was waiting for you. We were doing some work in the East Field last week, and then our father had us digging a new well. Oh, I see. Any more dreams, Caleb? Caleb stopped eating his piece of pie, and then swallowed. None lately, he insisted. Oh, guess what? I asked Mrs. Rickton if she could teach me how to make pottery, and she told me I could come over to her place any afternoon on Tuesday or Thursday, and she would give me lessons. Isn't that great? Exclaimed Martha. Wow, I didn't know you liked to do that. I do. And the best part of that is, smiled Martha, waiting to see if Caleb would realize the other reason she was excited about it. Caleb looked perplexed. You guys are so slow sometimes, teased Martha. The Richtons' place is just down the trail from yours, remember? And she said she wouldn't mind if you wanted to come over too, so she could teach you how to run the kiln, added Martha, winking her eye. Caleb's eyes widened with surprise. I guess I could learn to make pottery too, thought Caleb. Thomas McNeil suddenly spoke up, interrupting the soft murmur of the various dinner conversations. Well, everyone, I think that tonight is a good example of why we need to start looking at how we can unite all our clans into a larger community, boomed McNeil, finishing off the last bite of ham that remained on his plate. I mean, think about it. The past couple of years, most of us have been making do, traveling around like nomads, living in tents and so on. But now that we are settling in, it's time to start looking forward. By uniting our clans and pooling all our resources together, we should be able to build a stronger community. I agree, Tom. Like we talked about just a few minutes ago, we each have certain skills and trades that are important. Michael, your expertise is metalworking, mine is construction, Elijah's is horses, Uriah's is farming, and so on. By pooling all our resources and skills together, we can better help each other, said Daniels. Several nods could be seen, and the noise level rose as conversations continued between the guests. Elijah held up his hand to comment. The good Lord knows, we've all traveled a long way to get here, but as you can see, there aren't a lot of amenities out here. It will be nice to have a bathtub again, or running water, or have trained horses to pull your plows, and then to have someone with the skill to make a new plow. He paused and lowered his head, as if in deep thought. And it will give our children a chance for a fresh, new start. A lot better chance for our children to live here than there ever would have been living in those dreadful caves back in Texas, that's for sure, insisted Kathy Williams. You don't say. What part of Texas? Asked Daniels. We started out from Texas too, about 80 miles south of Alpine, Texas. Do you know where that is? We sure do. We lived about 15 miles northeast of Del Rio. There were some caverns close to us. We used the caverns there as storage for all our food and supplies, declared Williams. Well, I'll be damned. Daniels grinned. Elijah's grandfather, John Elgin, the one I told you about earlier, he owned a large ranch near Alpine that he had purchased a few years before Anastasia. My grandfather and his grandfather, said Daniels, pointing at Elijah. They even built many of the homes that used to be around here in this area we've settled. Isn't that right, Elijah? Elijah nodded. Yes, most of our grandparents lived in this area, long before the Great Cataclysm, when this area was still called the state of Virginia. The District of Columbia, mumbled Thomas. What's that? Asked Uriah. I was just thinking about stories that my dad told me when I was a boy, about when my grandparents lived not too far from here, up in the old capital city. You mean Washington, D.C.? Asked Sarah. Yes, Washington, D.C., hard to imagine, isn't it? Uttered Mary, thinking out loud. There was silence. Have any of you been up north to look around yet? Asked Uriah. Everyone shook their heads. Nope, we're sort of afraid to, I guess, continued McNeil. We've been hearing some strange stories. Are you referring to people you call the scavengers? Asked Daniels. No, not them. Williams here can tell you about the scavengers, but a few weeks ago we met another group of people living a few miles east of US and north of the river, the Ramirez clan. They told us about seeing some strange people with albino white skin and strange eyes. They call them the Shadow Men. They seem to live around the outskirts of the old capital city, explained McNeil. Conversations continued amongst the guests. Williams raised his hand. Here's what I can tell you about the scavengers. About a week and a half ago, we sent out a small group to do some exploring and fishing down along the river to our east. They were only supposed to be gone a couple of days. When they didn't return, we started getting worried about them, and so we sent another group out to go look for them. They found them walking back to the camp following the river. Were they okay? Asked Sarah. They weren't hurt or anything, but they said someone came into their camp at night, real quiet, and stole all their horses and food, explained Williams. Did they see them? Asked Mary. Nope, whoever it was, they were really quiet about it. Our group never heard a sound. There was more silence as everyone contemplated the news. Where was it that they camped? Asked Daniels. About 5 or 6 miles east of us. We went back out there a few days ago with more men to look around, but never saw anything, only found tracks. Well, that's another good reason for all of us to stick together and help each other. I guess we have to expect some of that to happen from time to time, said McNeil. Have any of you folks ever met any other groups in this area? Asked Sarah, starting to feel a bit anxious after hearing the other stories. There's that small group of folks who just settled in on the north side of the river, east of us, the Ramirez clan. They seem like friendly folks, with about 50 in their little group, said Kathy Williams. They came out here all the way from New Mexico. And there's a couple of smaller settlements south of you down along the creek, and there's a large group just west of us, near the old town of Manassas, the Argus clan. They've got a pretty big group of people. They came from out west, and California, said McNeil. California? Did they happen to share any news about what it's like out there? We've only heard rumors from some of the other groups we met on our trip up here, asked Mary, who paused in thought, looking over at her husband. It was that one group we met while stopped along the Mississippi River. Do you remember, Joseph? Joseph shook his head, trying to remember. I can tell you what news we've heard. It's a real mess out there. It seems they had a bad earthquake several years ago. It was so bad that it destroyed an old nuclear power plant that had been shut down a long time ago, and radiation leaked everywhere, and a lot of people got sick and died, said Roger Cardones. And then there's all the old cities. No one even dares to venture into them these days, unless they're crazy. There was quiet as everyone pondered the news that had been shared. Well, let's try to keep in contact with each other on a weekly basis. If everyone is agreeable to that, said Daniels. Everyone nodded. If anyone needs anything, or help with anything, or hears any more news about other clans or groups in the area, send out a message to the others as soon as possible, suggested McNeil. All nodded. Kathy Williams could be seen impatiently tapping her husband Michael on the shoulder for the minute, as her husband seemed to be ignoring her. Is there something you want to share, Kathy? Mary asked. Looking at Mary, then back at her husband with an angry stare. Well, Michael wasn't telling you everything about those people, the scavengers or whoever they are. Now we don't know that for sure, Kathy. It's speculation on our part, said Michael. Roger knows, he'll tell you, insisted Kathy. Everyone looked at Roger Cardones, who seemed a little hesitant at first to say anything. Well, like Michael said, it's just speculation, but we found some dead deer carcasses recently, out east of us, near where our group had been before, that had been stripped clean completely. However, he paused. What's so strange about that? Asked McNeil. Cardones continued, there were signs that the deer had been killed with a rifle shot to the head. There was a long pause, soft murmurs could be heard as everyone thought about the news. Rebecca Elgin was the first to break the silence. I don't understand. What's so strange about that? Asked Rebecca, who hadn't fully comprehended yet the significance of Roger's news, or its implications for the future safety of all the clans. Elijah explained, it's only strange, honey, because rifles are hard to come by these days, as there haven't been many rifles around in working order for many, many years.
You have been listening to Caleb Elgin, The Rise of the Clans by David E. Farmer. Also available on Amazon Kindle. More chapters coming soon. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Bye-bye.